Hi there, Kendra Tolbert here. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher, and I specialize in women's health and fertility. And today I have an interview for you. I had the opportunity to interview Tamara Melton, a registered dietitian who specializes in women's health. She's really quite lovely. I'm sure you're going to love this interview. She answered questions about fibroids, miscarriage, and fertility. So let's dive right in. Hi, Tamara. So excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This has been a long time coming, so I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited for everyone to meet you. And I'd love it if you would go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about how you ended up in the world of nutrition and who is Tamara Milton.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to be a dietitian. Thankfully, the summer before I started school, I wanted to be a chef. I was accepted into culinary school. I was living in Florida, so I was going to go to Miami and become a chef. But I had a conversation with my grandma, and she had just been recently diagnosed with diabetes. And I was asking her one day, like, what are you supposed to eat? And she said, I don't know. And I'm like, how do you not know what to eat? And I just thought to myself, like, who are the people who teach people how to eat if they got diagnosed with diabetes or something like that? So that's when I discovered nutrition as a field and changed my major right before I started undergrad. So I knew from 18, like, this is what I want to do. And for me, it's a great marriage of food, which was my original love, like having that culinary background, and then also science, which I always loved as well. So being able to bring those things together and working with people, which I also love too. So that's how I got into nutrition. Yeah.
I love that. And so, what road did you take to end up in women's health nutrition? Because that's where you are now.
A long and windy road. 2 years. So I knew while I was in graduate school that I did not want to go into kind of like an intervention space. I didn't want to be in inpatient hospital places. And there's definitely a place for RDs who want to work in that space. They're very, very important. I just wanted to be working with people and be actually able to make a difference in their lives. And that happens a lot more kind of in the public, in the community. And so I started working in wellness right away. So I was in nutrition education, wellness, doing like community garden curriculum with little kids, like little K-12, little people. So I did that for a few years, and then I transitioned into a corporate wellness program. So it was it's called Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is where I live still, and they were starting a wellness program for their employees. So I was actually creating from the ground up. We had a great team there. I'm still friends with a lot of my former colleagues then. And we were doing this wellness program. So that's where I really got to work on my counseling skills with people, my teaching skills, because we would have large groups that we were teaching about nutrition. So I did that for a couple years. Then I started my own wellness business. Children's became my clients. I went back and worked with them. I also was able to do work with other big clients like Home Depot and Zep, which is like a chemical company or something, but I was doing employee wellness, things like that. I had been teaching this whole time at a university that I graduated from here in Atlanta, Georgia State. So just doing like kind of part-time instructor, one class a semester, that intro to nutrition course for all students across the university, which I love. To be like a big class of like 60 people who were of all different majors or whatever. And I had an opportunity to come on full-time in 2011. So I came into full-time to do on, admissions and recruiting for the health professions, and then also teaching nutrition. At the time, my husband and I were trying to get pregnant. So we got pregnant the first time right before I started that job. In fact, I found out like a couple days before that I was pregnant. Um, that would have been by the time I started there. Did I say the first time? That was not the first time. That was the fourth time I was pregnant. It was the first couple years before that. I had been going through recurrent miscarriages, and we'd done the whole gamut, right? So we'd done the whole first one happens. Oh, that's normal. That happens. We get pregnant right again. Second one happens. Now I'm like, wait a minute, what? Because I was young. I was like late 20s. And so we start going to a reproductive endocrinologist. They looked at my husband. He has two children before we were married. So they were like, oh, he's good. I'll never forget my reproductive endocrinologist saying, oh, he's fine. It's you. He literally said, or someone else did. It was not him, because my reproductive endocrinologist was pretty awesome. So we did go to an RE. They did do the whole battery of tests. We found out that I had fibroids, which we found out with the first couple of pregnancies, because both of those babies made it to 14 weeks. So we had pretty steady heartbeats and everything like that. Um, everything was fine. Progesterone's fine. Everything's fine. We're like, did all the tests and everything. So kind of told my husband, like, look, I just need a break from this. Like, I'm good. Let's just wait. A year later, we got pregnant again and lost that baby as well. And that summer, when I got hired for that job, is when we got pregnant the fourth time. And we were probably the least joyful couple in every single appointment, because every single appointment you're expecting to hear that the baby didn't make it. And that was when I was starting that job at the university. It was at that time. But she did make it, though childbirth was like, it was up until the last minute, it was a stressful pregnancy and childbirth and everything. And then as life would have it, we had oops baby after that. My baby was 6 months, and we found out when she was 6 months old, I was pregnant again. So now today we have two little girls. And so during that time, I was having my daughters, I was in academia and I was working. And it's really interesting when you go through things like this, when you're just kind of in that space, you're just in that space. I was not in that space as a clinician by any means. I was in that space as a patient. When I look back at it now, I was in that space as a woman who was trying to live through infertility without any answers, trying to find people who could help me and things like that. And then I ended up, with two babies, and then we'll probably talk about it. Then I tumble into, challenges with heavy bleeding and eventually a hysterectomy at a very young age. So all that happened within the span of about 7, 8 years. And I can look back at it now and say, wow, this all happened to me. I had an opportunity this last fall, thanks to a COVID layoff, which was a blessing, to decide, like, what is it that I want to do next? And I'm now a few years out from all those things that happened to me. My daughters are 7 and 9 now. And I said, I want to work in women's health, because I looked back at what happened to me, and I just wish there were so many times that there was somebody who could have said a lot of different things. Like, there's just a lot of different points I can think about in my journey where I had some phenomenal healthcare providers. I had some not so great healthcare providers. I had some horrible healthcare providers who really should not be practicing with anyone. I wanted to be one of those phenomenal healthcare providers in that nutrition space. So I decided to take this opportunity to really take kind of my lived experience. Let me add on some more of my own training and really go into this women's health space.
Mm, I love that road. Not not exactly everything that
Yeah.
happened. I know that probably wish it had all happened a different way, maybe without the loss and the pain, but
Yeah.
and not but and you were able to turn it into something where you were able to give back and be compassionate. And on top of that, you have the confidence, because I feel like right now in the world of internet healthcare, it can be all about people's personal experiences, and they maybe don't have the credentials on top of it. Or they have the credentials, but they're lacking the compassion and the understanding. And you were able to marry the two in such a lovely and unique way. So I'm excited for all the women that you're helping and you're going to continue to help.
Yeah, I think that point of what you said, either having the credentials but not living through that, or living through it but not having the training. Um, there's a lot of people who are providers who go into this space, or people who were patients who decided to become providers. And when you can have both of those things together, and I just finished up a 12-week course on integrative and functional nutrition. Like I said, like, let me invest in actually more of this. This is more than just me going out there and learning on these things on my own. And I can already tell there's even more learning than I have, but I can already see there's so many times I'm sitting down and learning things. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that as a patient. Why that now I know why it happened. So I do think that for me, that makes me excited. It makes me feel like everything that I went through was for a reason. Like that,
Mhm.
there is a reason why I had to go through all that to get where I am today.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So we're going to hop right into subscriber questions. But first, actually, we're going to get to one of my questions because I just wanted to hear your take on it. It's something that a lot of people ask me or kind of just assume must be true. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Do people with PCOS have to follow a low carb diet?
No, they need to follow a diet where it's balanced, so that because they might have insulin insensitivity, I like to say. So in some way, their body is not really taking out. I like to call insulin the key that unlocks the door to the cell to get sugar in. That's what it does. It's like, come in, sugar, to the cell. Let's get you some energy. And people who have PCOS may have um, insulin insensitivity, so they need to get to be able to support their body, so they have it more. So that doesn't mean that it has to be low carb. It doesn't have to be low carb, but it needs to be balanced because you don't want to. Not enough keys there to get enough people through the door. That's what it kind of like kind of feels like. So yes, it doesn't have to be low carb, and I think it's more moderate. And there's other things that affect your blood sugar and then insulin than just carbohydrates. So that's why working with a dietitian is really, really helpful because it's not an either or. Everybody's a little bit different, but this notion that it needs to be low carb or gluten free, that doesn't necessarily jive for everyone. And for most women, they can have a moderate amount of carbohydrates in their
Mm,
eating.
yeah. Awesome. Happy you landed there.
Yes.
I wouldn't expect anything different, but I always like to hear from different people, and everyone expresses it a bit differently. So I like that you referred to it as insulin insensitivity. I think that's such a
Yeah.
lovely way of saying it. Yeah.
And it has like ranges to it. It's not like a black
Mhm.
or white. There's some people who are more sensitive to others. It's not it's not like a either or type thing. And you can help your body to become more sensitive. It can be less. There's ways of it going. So it's definitely something that you can move and kind of support your body with.
Okay, so this wasn't a question I intended to ask, but since you
Okay.
brought it up, what's just one thing that's not food related that people can do to increase their sensitivity?
Movement. So if they can move their bodies, and I did not say exercise, I said movement. And so gentle movement is a really good way. I tell my patients that I work with, there is no food, no pill, no anything that we have that can replace movement in our bodies and in our cells. So research has shown that somebody who moves more, and it can be what we think of as exercise, but it can also just be doing gardening, vacuuming the floor, scrubbing the floors, playing with your kids, any number of things that has your body moving, gets your heart rate elevated a bit, helps your body to pay more attention to the sugar that's in your cell, that's in your bloodstream, to bring it into your cell, helps to improve your insulin sensitivity. So movement is something that has nothing to do with food. And another thing too is stress management, and movement can help with that. So I added a second thing in there, but those are two things that you can do. Has nothing to do with food, right? And it's something that most people can do. It doesn't have to be a crazy hard workout or anything like that. In fact, our bodies like to have movement all the time. We're made to move. And so that's why even gentle movement, just more sprinkled throughout the day, our body really likes, versus this really hard type of very high impact, high intensity type of exercise that maybe we do only a few times a week.
Those are really good tips. Thank you. Okay, the next question. How can I improve my PCOS without focusing on weight loss?
So we talked about a couple of things already. So we talked about the movement piece of it, because that has, besides like the insulin sensitivity, it can help out with inflammation as well, especially if it's more gentle. And then because inflammation is, something that can make the symptoms of PCOS worse, looking at what are ways to have bring down inflammation. And so food, we know, is really helpful with that. There are some foods that really like are a powerhouse of being anti-inflammatory. So your colorful fruits and veggies, we know they're anti-inflammatory. So they look really beautiful, but also they let you know like there's a lot of good things in this. But also your ones that aren't so colorful, so our garlic and onions, those guys and gals too are still really good. So those are really good to have. People know about things like turmeric and ginger, and maybe less so about things like ashwagandha, things like that, that can help out with inflammation too. So those are some things that you could also do as well. You might need to have someone to actually run some extra labs or tests to see, because we can sit here and we can say, okay, maybe you can have this food, or let's try that out. Let's try some movement. Let's try some things to maybe help to reduce, the inflammation. But with PCOS, it's having high androgen levels. So those are hormones, and we need to see, are they actually high? So we can see if hirsutism is there, if there's, male pattern hair growing, right? So we have that, or baldness or something, right? So it's something like that could be going on. But it really helps to have numbers. That's where this like science part comes in. It helps to have the numbers so that we know where we're going, because everybody's a little bit different. and it can kind of help to put some pieces into place there. So just trying to balance it out. Also, things like chemicals that could be coming in from your environment, those are hard to avoid, right? Because we do have to go out and about. I wonder if all of our masks are helping. Hopefully, a good thing from having to wear masks is helping from that. But also, if you have any plastics or things like that you have that's in your daily life, that's one thing I think we don't talk about enough, that we can let people know about adjusting those types of things. And if you are able to access some sort of testing to test your hormones, you can then test it again and see if those things have changed. That might be able to help out too with those symptoms.
Very good. So focus on behaviors, know your
Yeah.
numbers, and track your numbers.
Yes.
Besides the weight numbers. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The weight is something that we cannot control as much as we think that we're controlling it, and it's not a behavior. So weight is not behavior. People, if you were to create a goal that is focused on weight loss or weight gain, whatever, you're going to have to do something for that to happen. So that's something that you do is actually your behavior. So we want to really focus more on that. And there's a large body of research, evidence-based, anecdotal, all the things that show that even if you control for weight, if you take it out as a factor, people can still improve symptoms, and weight might fall as a byproduct, but it's because of behavior change. And maybe those symptoms improved because of other things that you did that also caused the weight to fall.
Mhm.
So if you're someone who, we know people don't sleep enough, could have higher weight. And that's because your hormones need to balance out and a lot of other things. So maybe your weight comes down, but was it the weight loss that helped, or was it because you got more sleep? That's a behavior change. So that's something you can change and adjust.
Oh, it's so important to tease those apart because I feel like they do often get conflated. But they're two separate things. There's behavior, and there's sometimes an outcome from that behavior. And
Yeah.
sometimes we think it's the outcome that actually makes a difference. Lovely. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, next question. I have PCOS and struggle with irregular menstruation and menorrhagia. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
So you are. I always say it wrong too, so we'll go with that.
I'd like to know the diet and supplements to be taken to conceive faster.
Ooh, so you want to make sure you're eating enough, right? So when you have a baby, you are growing another human being. I know that sounds crazy to like say the most obvious, but sometimes I think women forget that, especially with social media. And you have these very thin bodied people who are having babies, and we have this thin ideal. And then some people are thinking, I need to, restrict what I'm having, especially if they're thinking with PCOS, they need to restrict carbohydrates. So they're bringing their calorie level down. Your body will feel much more comfortable with you conceiving if it knows it can actually support a baby. That's what it's trying to get to, and support it throughout the whole span of your pregnancy. So everything that you need to be doing as far as eating well, but also making sure you have enough calories is really important too. And then if you find, I think infertility, it's like diagnosed if you are trying for longer than a year, but also making sure that you know when you can get pregnant. One of the things I teach is fertility awareness, and there's a lot of women. I just taught this a few weeks ago in a group coaching class that I had, and I was teaching about a woman's cycle. And I asked my participants, "Do you know when you can get pregnant?" Do you know your whole cycle? Do you understand it? And about half the ladies raised their hand. By about a third of the way through the class, they were like, "I don't necessarily know." So, are you ovulating? Got to find out why you're not ovulating. What could be going on there? Is there something? Is it stress? Your body knows when you're stressed, and it's going to, for some people, it will stop you from actually ovulating because that's not a good time to be having a baby. Your body just knows that biologically. It's not a good time to be having a baby. So, do you maybe need to manage stress that could be going on? So, that could be happening too. And the reason why you want to know about when you're actually fertile is when should you be having sex to get pregnant. It's not, there's a few days out of the month, and it just a little bit for every woman, a little bit different. So you kind of need to know. Make sure your partner as well, that making sure that he is healthy and is able to, his sperm is healthy to be able to get you pregnant too. So this is a one that I think the not taking in enough, not only calories, but carbohydrates. So, that's that delicate balance. of PCOS. We want to make sure we're balancing, the sugar so that insulin sensitivity will work out, but not restricting too much that you're not taking in enough. And then also your weight needs to be at a certain level too, so your body can feel like it can actually support a pregnancy. So those are just some of the factors as well. But I mentioned the fertility awareness because not a lot of women know, or shouldn't say not a lot. There's a good number of women who just don't quite know the window. And
Mhm.
it literally is a window of time. And that's it. That's the only days per month that you can get there. But first, you want to make sure that you're ovulating. So we're supporting that sort of ovulation first.
Yeah. That's so important. We had Caitlin Johnson on, I don't remember when, I think it was the end of last year, and she talked about the fertile window for PCOS and how it can be more difficult to locate it because it can happen later in the cycle.
Yeah.
It can be months of waiting for ovulation to occur. And if someone doesn't know that that's when it's not happening on day 14 for
Not
everyone,
happening
they
on
may
day
miss
4.
their window. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you are having irregular periods, right? So if
Mhm.
you're being taught the 28-day cycle ovulating on day 14, and your cycle, first of all, even if you are regular and you're not 28 days, okay, then you might be missing the window. And then if you have, as we often see with PCOS, if you're having irregular periods, then do you know when you're about to ovulate? Do you know if you did ovulate? You can do the temping as well. But temping tells you that you ovulated. So it tells you it already happened. Do you know, and there's a way to know if you're going to ovulate? Do you know about cervical mucus and things like that to see when the time is right and when the time is coming? So yeah, that's something it's really helpful to have that education because if your cycles are not consistent, then you'd be able to tell just a little bit better, like when your window of opportunity is there.
Good, good, good. Okay. So the next question, I have lean PCOS and am considered underweight. It's hard for me to get information about what I should eat. I always feel guilty when I eat a lot of carbs, usually white rice for my daily meal because I'm Indonesian and we usually eat it. When I change my diet, I eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, but I was told that sweet fruits also contain fructose, which is bad for PCOS. So can you please give me the right information about what I should eat and avoid? I'm afraid to eat a lot and raise my weight. Otherwise, I need to keep my weight on track. So before you answer this, time out.
There's a lot.
There's a lot
to that.
there. So I think I'll see if we can break this up a bit. But I also feel like I need to make this announcement that you're like the best person to answer this on so many levels because I have definitely come across some information from you that just gives me the impression that you think it's incredibly important for people to honor their heritage when they're making nutrition choices. So to hear that someone culturally, like white rice is important, feels guilty when enjoying something that's culturally important, I can't think of a better person to answer this question for this person. So first, I'm going to break it up into questions and ask, does she need to be feeling guilty about enjoying white rice?
Absolutely not. That is your heritage. It's no different than people enjoying their potatoes or their yuca or their whatever. Insert whatever, white carbohydrate that's in there. This health halo, and I'm going to say it, that brown rice has gotten, that it's just, the way that people should be eating, or alternatively, barley or whatever it is. There are a lot of cultures that eat white rice. There's a lot of them. That's kind of a staple that's in there. So, no, you don't. And if you're working with a practitioner who doesn't have enough knowledge about the chemistry and chemical breakdown of foods to be able to help you to see how you can continue to honor your heritage and enjoy foods that remind you of home and remind you of family and what is very important to you, please find another one because that's what we're trained to do. And we should be able to do that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you gave such good tips early on when you were talking about the whether or not people need to follow a low carb diet. You talked about pairing those things and creating balance. So it's
Right.
not about eliminating them, it's about making sure that you're enjoying your white rice with things that provide that balance.
Yeah.
Good to know. Let's see. Are there any foods that she should be avoiding? She mentioned fruits because they contain fructose, which she heard is bad for PCOS. What are your thoughts on that?
So here's the thing about fructose and any of the oses. So anything that has an ose on the end is a carbohydrate, right? And it is. It's usually a simpler type of a string of carbohydrates that your body will break down pretty quickly and convert into pretty much sugar, so blood sugar. What you're trying to do is you're trying to slow the emptying of those sugars into your bloodstream. You do not want to shunt it because insulin has to then take all these sugars and try to get into the cell. I don't have enough keys. There's not enough doors. There's too many sugars like coming. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to slow the flow. I like to describe it as you need somebody to be a bouncer getting into the club. We can only let so many people into the club at a certain amount of time. So if you're having fruit, which has remember we talked about inflammation, antioxidants, everything. So we want to have that in there. If you can eat the fruit in its natural packaging. So if it comes in a natural package where you eat the whole thing, you're typically also eating fiber with it. And fiber is kind of a bouncer, slowing down the amount of sugar that's going into your bloodstream. But so do other foods like protein. That's going to slow things down as well. Fat as well. So healthier fat. So what is your white rice coming to the party with? Who is it with? Do you have some protein there? Awesome. That can be animal protein. It could be plant protein. That's there. Does it have some fat there? Phenomenal. So that can be in the form of, depending on if you had a cooking oil that it cooked in or something like that. It could be something that's also on the side externally that's like avocado or something, however it is that you're kind of putting it together. What that does is it takes, even if you have fruit, once it goes into your stomach and then it starts to go into your small intestine, it is released more slowly into your bloodstream. It's the more balanced meal that we're talking about. And so even if it is fructose, okay, so even if it is there, it's just going to get released more slowly into your bloodstream, which allows insulin, which helps to get it into the cells. So it's not sitting out in your bloodstream, causing ill effects, causing inflammation and things like that. It's just coming in more slowly. And so you're trying to just put it together. So if you are having, and I mention this to people, whether they have PCOS or not, this is anybody who I work with. If you're having a piece of fruit, try to put something with it that can help your body to keep you fuller for longer and will avoid kind of like a spike and a drop in sugar. If you're having a fruit that doesn't have a lot of fiber that would come with it, so think of like a banana, because we peel off the fibrous part. We do not, hopefully we're not eating the outside of a banana. We're not eating that. So is it coming with something else? Something like strawberries, berries, things like that, they have fiber in them. You're eating the whole package of that fruit. So it's what you're eating with it, more so than eating it by itself. Fructose is a type of sugar, but let me tell you, the rice that you're eating is also eventually turning into a sugar as well downstream. That's the way that happens with the way that our body digests it. So just kind of think about what can I put with it, because I want to make sure that the release of those sugars into my bloodstream are not too much than your body can handle.
Yeah. Good, good, good. Okay. So none of these things are inherently bad. It's
Correct.
what are you pairing it with so that your
Yeah.
body can better handle what you're fighting it with, and to not reduce it all down to this single thing, right? Because fruit is not just fructose. There's so many other things in there that are beneficial that you mentioned. So
Mhm.
good to know. She also mentioned that she's afraid to eat a lot and raise her weight. Otherwise, she needs to keep her weight on track. What are your thoughts around the name lean PCOS and the pressure when someone is in a smaller body to make sure that they stay in a smaller body when they have PCOS?
Yeah, probably because there's been a lot of, and health doctors and such will say, they look at a woman who's in a larger body and she has these other symptoms, PCOS. And that's where it comes from. And so women who have lean PCOS are trying to think, if I gain more weight, I'm going to make this worse. This is going to probably become a worse condition for me to even be able to handle. And remember, it may not be the weight that's causing the symptoms that are happening. If you're trying, it sounds like this person was trying to get pregnant. Your body's going to have a certain point where it needs to have enough weight on board to be able to support the pregnancy so that it feels like we're going to be okay. So I think we need to be careful to separate out the fact that weight has been stigmatized to cause a lot of things. And that does not correlate. It does not. We know that through the research. And she's in kind of that, and I understand it and I empathize with kind of being in that balance of, I don't want to exacerbate these symptoms that I already have that could be leading to having not having ovulation. Therefore, I'm not going to get pregnant. You're not going to get pregnant without ovulation. But you also may not have ovulation if your body's not at the weight that it feels comfortable to have ovulation. And then if there's not enough carbohydrates to be able to support it as well. because we've seen that, that amenorrhea that happens because there's just not enough carbohydrates on board. So if it's really challenging and she's really worried about, her weight and being worried about gaining too much weight, maybe working with someone who can help her to know her numbers, to see if she's going to be able to eat the foods that she wants to eat, manage her weight to where it's going to be healthy for her to be able to support a pregnancy, to support her all the way throughout her pregnancy. And then PCOS doesn't go away, and then the ill effects of it doesn't go away just because you had a baby and you're on that postpartum side. You're going to be worried, or you should be thinking about, hopefully not going into, people who have insulin sensitivity or insensitivity have a higher risk of developing diabetes or gestational diabetes when they're pregnant. And so working with somebody in that prenatal period can help to answer kind of like all those questions and concerns that you have. It's hard to say it without, knowing the person, but also getting you through the pregnancy and then afterwards, because that's a really challenging time for moms too, especially if you're breastfeeding, because now you're trying to, maintain this other life as well, and your body's trying to replenish what it had to basically, give to the baby to help you to support your baby. So, yeah, I think that, that the fact that there's so much stigma around weight, so many things, weight is blamed for so many things that people, there's a lot of, I don't want to say unnecessary concern. I don't want to downplay the fact that there's concern there, but there may not need to be as much concern as she may be having right now because she's been diagnosed with lean PCOS and is thinking maybe it's going to get worse if she does gain weight.
Got you. Great answers. Thank you.
Mhm.
What can be done to reduce the risk of developing fibroids? Oh, it came out all crazy. Fibroids.
The fibroids is one of those areas that is for me ultimately the reason why I had a hysterectomy at the age of 34. So I didn't finish that part of my story, so I'll kind of finish it up. So after I found out with my very first pregnancy, the one that we lost, that I had a fibroid. In fact, me being young and dumb, I guess at the time, I'll never forget. My husband and I were at the beach, and I was lying down like we were at the hotel, and I was kind of laying down. I was feeling like on my pelvic bone. I was like, oh my gosh, it's the baby. It was not the baby. I was like 12 weeks pregnant or 8 weeks. So you're not going to feel. It was a fibroid, and it was called her Fran after a while because Fran was like with every pregnancy. She was there, and she had a lot of friends in my uterus, let me tell you. And so with each pregnancy, the fibroids grew. I now think, and looking back, that each miscarriage was because of fibroids, because once I had the hysterectomy and we had the pathology report, it was to the point to where the pathologist, and that's a doctor who looks to basically take tissues and see what's going on with the tissues or any organs or anything. That person wrote, there's just so many fibroids, we're not even going to track them all. It was just to that point. I had my baby a year and a half before, and my uterus was still at 20 weeks size, was how many and how large the fibroids were. I had no education on how chemicals can affect and cause estrogens in your body, or even fat can to cause your body to feed fibroids and have them growing. So I didn't know to do things like reducing the amount of plastics that I was using, or using BPA free plastics. I just didn't have that. Now, I heard about BPA. It was interesting because it was trendy. That was why I heard about it. I saw people using more. They were talking about BPA free, but it's so funny with things that are trendy. There was never the reason of like, why do we care if it's BPA free? There was never that explanation. So I didn't know why. So I didn't, make any active change in that area. And then beyond that, beyond the fact that we might have these chemicals that are causing more estrogens to be forming, it's kind of a struggle in the research of seeing like what is it that has really been proven to help to reduce fibroids. We think that it may have something to do with the way that women are eating. It may have something to do. It probably definitely is connected to genetics because it runs in families so heavily. I think that there's not been as much research because of the women that it is in, women of color. And that's why there's just hasn't been as much research. Not because necessarily there isn't research that doesn't want to be done. Women of color and people of color tend to be more suspicious of being researched for very valid reasons. Very valid reasons. You only need to go Google Henrietta Lacks or the Tuskegee experiment to see the reasons why. And those are just two of many, many examples. And so we just don't have as much. And so we have more research around if you have fibroids and you have a lot of bleeding, how to help to support with anemia and things that can happen with that. So we have a lot more research around that. There's been research around vitamin D and supplementation, and if not having enough vitamin D might lead to the growth of fibroids. But that's one of those areas that's funny. I've talked to colleagues because I'm like, post having a hysterectomy, because I got to that point where my doctors finally said like you're bleeding for 16 days at a time, and I had a 28-day cycle. It was very much on track after I had my daughters, came right back. But it's to the point where I'm at 16 days of heavy bleeding, not 16 days of like maybe some of it's light bleeding. So it is heavy. Imagine your heaviest day for 16 days. Blood clots are because that's when your body's trying to, you're supposed to have anti-clotting. It can't even make enough of that hormone to stop the clot. So that's why you're passing clot. That is not normal. If you have clots that are bigger than a dime, that is not normal. You should not be having that happening. But it's because fibroids have such a surface area and they produce more blood. That's what happens. They actually cause more blood happening. And so if you do have that happening, you're trying to reduce the size of fibroids. Unfortunately, like what the evidence actually shows, there isn't much evidence right now as to what can help that. So in my own case, that's why it led to hysterectomy. So I want to kind of talk about that for a second. I think that there is a lot of conversations, and I get it because I was that person of women saying, I'm trying to preserve my uterus at all costs. And I was that person. I was about 18 months of me going to doctors, out of state, in state, looking at different procedures that I could have done, hopefully to preserve my uterus. Not fertility. My husband had a vasectomy, and I planned on staying with him, so we weren't trying to have any more kids. But I just wanted to have my uterus. I'm like, this is what I believe in. And I remember my hematologist sat me down one day, great guy, and he said, I am trying to fill up a bucket with a hole in it. And he said, I get it. I know what you're trying to do. I get that you want to preserve your uterus. He said, but if you were to go out here right now and you had a car accident, he's like, you're done. That if you had a trauma event, this is it. And he said, I understand that this happens a lot and you're frustrated because it shouldn't happen. He said, but we are today. And I want you to really think about having a surgery because he said, I get you up to full pool and your hemoglobin is fine. And you go and have another period and you are down to like a 4, and that's super low. And he had this I'll never forget him saying this to me. And that's when it kind of hit that point where I said, you know what, I need to make a decision for me and for my family of what is it that I need to do. I was so exhausted. I didn't know how tired I was until I wasn't tired because I was a mom of babies. And so I'd been tired for years. I was exhausted. I was just completely wiped out. And I say that to say that there are definitely UAE, which is uterine artery embolization, that they cauterize the vessels going to fibroids to kind of stop or slow down the growth. There's myomectomies where they actually go in, surgeons can go in and take out fibroids, which is really a great option if you're trying to preserve fertility, you haven't had a baby yet. There's the watch and see. Let's just watch the fibroids and see what they do. There's hysterectomy. And if you decide that you need a hysterectomy, that's okay. It really is. Like it's okay. And I know it's harder if you haven't had children. We were blessed that even through all that, we had our 2 daughters. But that is okay because if your quality of life is to the point like where I was, you can't leave the house for days at a time because you're bleeding so much. You're exhausted. You're not able to keep up with daily life. That just where we are right now, unfortunately, with fibroids and the research that we have, it's okay. And if you need to even seek help to talk to someone to get yourself to that space, I'm not telling everybody to do what I did. I know that once I got to that space and he gave me permission, I felt like that day. And he was like, it's okay. You're not feeling, you're not a worse mother, dietitian, or anything by making this decision. It's okay to do this. That is okay too. So, because it is quite frustrating at the point that we're at, that we don't have enough research. And I think there are things that people can do. that we can do. I think there are lifestyle changes. I think there is something heavily genetic, but I think we don't have enough research to know. I can't even confidently say, yes, go and change X, Y, Z to change it. There are anecdotes. I'm not saying there aren't people who've changed things, but there's not across the board, enough that we can come back and say, this is what you should do. So it's one of those tough places, which is why if you look at my Instagram, we'll see that I support women who have fibroids because I know what that felt like. And it affects so many women. It's very, very common. So, but do look at your plastics that I will give you. Like look at those, do look at those kind of like environmental factors that could be affecting. Um, it's basically what it's doing is adding an extra estrogens into your body, and you might also see it if you have like really fibrotic breasts, so they feel really dense. That's the same kind of mechanism happening in your body that is feeding fibroids as well too. So it could be what's going on too.
I really, really appreciate that answer because it was responsible in the way that you actually took a look at the research. And it was understanding a lot of ways. I think there can be a lot of shame for people when they end up choosing a medical intervention. There's a feeling that they needed to do it the natural way. But I think it's empowering to know that you have a right to choose what ultimately supports your quality of life. And so I appreciate that answer so much.
Yeah, and you can talk to your provider. I decided to do the surgery when I found a doctor, and I'll tell you, I shopped around. We were privileged to have actually switch health insurance companies, so I was able to go out of state to find a provider. I was a difficult case. I had my uterus had adhesed to my abdominal wall because of scar tissue from C-section. I had C-sections with both my daughters, and to my bladder a little bit. So I was, they went in, did an ultrasound and checked all that out. So I had a surgeon who I was in a hospital. I was not in an office where somebody said, you'll hear sometimes, oh, we can do this in the office. Ask them questions because if they need to transition to open, I had laparoscopic. What if I had to go to open surgery? What if they have to bring colleagues in? Think about that. It's not convenient for the doctor. It's what do you need as a patient? Advocating for yourself, asking these questions to go in and to have that. And so I was able to have that support. If you don't have someone who can be there with you, try to find someone, a friend or colleague. There are organizations as well, advocates, patient advocates within healthcare systems that you can ask a lot of questions about and see. The surgery that I had, we had everything that's left now is my ovaries. We decided to remove my cervix because my surgeon said, the risk for cervical cancer is there if it's still there. Its purpose is to keep a baby in place, and there's no baby there anymore to be worrying about. And my fallopian tubes are also removed as well to reduce the risk of ovarian cancer. I'm not saying that's right for you, but that was her presenting to me these options and saying, I will support you in whatever part of these organs you want to keep. I'm just telling you what the research says. Someone should be telling you all of that. There shouldn't just be this blanket, okay, we're going to do this procedure and you don't understand all the different pieces. So make sure that you're asking those questions so that you can feel comfortable. I felt more comfortable because I had to mourn the fact that I'm having this hysterectomy. I'm having this surgery. I'm having it the same age that my mom had. I said I wasn't going to be that person, and I'm here and I'm doing it. But then she just gave me so many options. It made me feel like it wasn't just a fly by night decision. It wasn't just I gave up and I didn't do my research. We actually sat down. We're able to have these conversations. So every patient deserves that. Every woman deserves to have those conversations.
I agree. I agree. So we're going to change it up a little. We're actually going to talk a bit about preconception. Um, when should someone start taking prenatal vitamins when they're preparing to start trying to get pregnant?
There you go. Take them then, because there's not going to be because you could get pregnant, right? And you want to have is if a few weeks before you know if you're pregnant, and that baby's already in there, rocking and rolling and growing, and everything. So it doesn't hurt to take prenatals, and I just want to dip into the postnatal. Take them while you're breastfeeding as well, like all the way through. So don't stop taking those prenatal vitamins. But as soon as you start trying to get pregnant, switch over from. Hopefully, you're taking a daily multi, but switch over to the prenatal at that point.
Good, good, good. Okay. Um, How can I reduce my risk of miscarriage with nutrition or other lifestyle changes? Or really, is there anything that can be done?
There's some things that you'll miscarriage happens because of there could be a genetic abnormality with the fetus. There could be fibroids, so that is definitely a cause for a miscarriage. It's really not something you can prevent. I want to say that. And why is it important? Because if it does happen to you and it happens to 1 in 4 women, it's not your fault. So it's not something you can prevent. It's not your fault. I mean, if somebody falls or something happens to them, that could cause a miscarriage, but it's not something that you can really do. So everything that you would do to try to have a healthy pregnancy is what you can focus on. If you have reoccurrent miscarriage, so you've had 2 or more miscarriages and no live births in between, you then can be diagnosed as someone has infertility, and then you can transition over to working with an obstetrician who's called a reproductive endocrinologist. So this person has more training in hormones and in fertility, and they can do more testing and be able to test more and see. Like I said, in my situation, I came out nothing. There was nothing, which is why I think it was probably the fibroids. I mean, we get pregnant by looking at each other. That was not the issue in our situation. There was something else that was going on. There's something else going on to have 3 in a row like that. So just do what you would do to keep yourself supported. Try to reduce, your amount of stressors that you have going on. Self-care is super important as well too. But do know that if you have a miscarriage, it's not your fault. There's many different reasons why that could have happened. So that's why I want to kind of stress that there's not much you can do to prevent it, so much as all the things we're already taking our prenatals, making sure we're hydrated, trying to be all the things we're already told to do to just have a healthy pregnancy and be ready to be pregnant.
Gotcha. Okay. And our last question, do you have any nutrition tips or guidance for people experiencing menopause or going through menopause?
Yeah, so I don't work so much in the perimenopause and menopause space. The reason why I kind of call that out is because it's a great time for women. I can't wait, honestly, to get there. I feel I can get more sassy than I am. Some of my favorite women are in, I'm serious, like are in that age group. So I think that's great. But what your body is doing is actually like kind of a crazy topsy-turvy of hormones. I shouldn't say topsy-turvy, but estrogen actually starts to increase quite a bit in some women. Their cycles start to shorten for some women. Sometimes it starts to lengthen. There's a lot of things going on there. So what you want to do is being able to support your hormones. And the way that you do that is the way that you were supporting your hormones before, which is trying to have those balanced meals and things like that. I attended a webinar recently where it said that they find that women have on average 10 pounds of weight gain, and that's an average, right? So you might see some weight gain, and that just happens because of the shifting of hormones. And perimenopause is about 10 years. So it takes about 10 years for women to settle in, and it can start as early as the mid 30s for some women. Just depends on who they are. So, and if you find that you're having things like a lot of hot flashes, or you're not able to sleep or something like that, there might be some things that you can do nutritionally, like with soy or some other herbs and things like that. Every woman is a little bit different. That can kind of help you to manage those symptoms as you get through. A lot women have a lot less symptoms once they are past the perimenopause and they're solidly in the menopause phase. One thing we do know is those protective effects of estrogen start to go away, right? So those are starting to fall off. So what does that make us think about? People a lot of times think about bones and osteoporosis, but estrogen and progesterone are pretty phenomenal hormones. They help us with our brain health. They help our heart, help our digestive system. They help us to manage stress better. Those hormones do. So other things you want to do nutritionally are kind of helping out in that area. So talk about our bone health. So bone health, most people think like, oh, milk. Well, they're thinking of calcium. Calcium is really important. So calcium you can get through milk and dairy, but you can also get it through other nutrients as well, like the bones of sardines have calcium in them, but also leafy greens. Vitamin D is really important too. So vitamin D supplementation might be needed for women as well. So think about that with your bone health, heart health. So if we're losing the protective effects of our estrogen, some of it, not all of it, but how can we support our heart health? Because we know we see more heart disease as women get older. It's one of the leading causes of death for women. is heart disease or stroke. And so, how do we do that? A lot of the healthy eating, but I want to mention one more thing of our healthy fats. So that's really important too. So that'll help with like managing all those cholesterols and making sure they're in the same area. And that movement is really important as well. So having that effect. And then I mentioned progesterone. It's kind of like our chill hormone that we have. And that we start to lose those effects too. So what can we do there? So that's looking at things, managing stress just on its own, and that self-care that you may have. And you might have some supplements you take if you're working with somebody who might offer some things that help to just kind of manage your stress. I know some that people may see are like DIM or NAC. Those are things that help your neurotransmitters just to kind of calm you down. Those are all because you're just having less of estrogen and progesterone in your system that your body is actually making, which is a natural progression of what happens when you start to transition into that. I caveat all that to say that I will say again, I'm not the expert in that space. It's a lot to learn for childbearing years for nutrition. And so thankfully there's some colleagues who who are getting more into that space of perimenopause and menopause, because it is, like I said, we're all going to get, if we're blessed to get to that age, we'll all get to that point. And there's so little research about it as what happens right in women's health. There's like this thing that happens to half the population, but people aren't talking about it. But I like to think that it's like what's changing, and then what are we not getting enough of, because it's just a natural change, and kind of how can we support those systems to balance that out.
Thank you for that. And thank you for all of your answers. You've shared so much information and wisdom. So I'm sure that people are going to want to learn even more from you and about you. And where can they do that?
So you can find me on Instagram at Tamara's with an S dot table. So at Tamara's table, you can find me there.
And I'll make sure to put that into the description box below. So you'll be able to click the links to find more about Tamara. All right. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kendra. I appreciate it.